Geert, I'm terrified. I'm a big DevOps fan.
Mhm.
And now I hear everywhere on the internet, I hear it on conferences, DevOps is dead. Long live platform engineering. And I think, well, in my opinion, DevOps is not dead. But
Yeah.
I know that you know a little bit about that.
Yeah, I agree that DevOps is still alive, but it's of course a marketing thing done by a lot of platform engineering product vendors, well, who want to invent the new best thing, right? So let's dive into the world of platform engineering and DevOps and what the differences are, how they actually work together quite well, because I believe that that is the case. So let's make an episode about that.
Let's do it.
The Lead Podcast, a podcast for leaders in engineering, architecture, and development.
So what I understand about DevOps is that, well, it's a practice where we bring teams together, development practices, operations practices. We bring those people together in a team so
Mhm.
that they can build and run their own software. And that includes the infrastructure, that includes security, that includes development, testing, and
Yeah.
everything that comes with it to actually build and run an application.
And removing the silos.
Removing the silos, building a culture, of course, is not only about the tools and the technology, but really have that culture of autonomy where we work together to build and run the software. And I thought that we were in our industry at a point that we finally had some point of an agreement that that is good practice and not have all these silos in the organization.
I think that's still the case, right? I think when teams do this, remove these silos, they become better engineering teams. They build better quality. They
Yeah.
can make better decisions of, should we focus on new features now, or should we focus a bit more on security or maintainability? Having those, having both in your portfolio as an engineering team, you can actually make those distinctions between, should we focus on this or that, instead of the traditional teams that were just feature factories and then throwing everything over the wall towards the next silo. So I still believe that that is a really good thing.
Yeah. So what is it then in the market that we hear that DevOps is dead and we need to now embrace platform engineering? So
Yeah.
why is that?
Yeah, the problem with DevOps is basically DevOps is really hard. Developers need to do a lot of things. They were used to focus on the features and developing mainly the application itself. But if you want to also run the application, you also need to know about monitoring. You need to know about the infrastructure it runs on, because we're all using the cloud now. So who is building that infrastructure in the cloud? It's that same team. So you need to do features, your infrastructure, your monitoring, costs are involved, all kinds of aspects that you need to take into account as a team yourself. So the cognitive load is becoming really, really high. And I see that with teams who try to adopt this new culture of moving towards DevOps, that is just too hard for them to actually get going.
Yeah, I can kind of recognize that actually, because when I was working with teams, I see, of course, there is always these people that are very good in everything, so they can easily embrace and they start doing all these things. But there is also like this big group of people that are traditionally a developer or maybe traditionally an operations person,
Yeah.
and they have a really hard time in embracing all of it, because it's now, the t-shirt sizing is now working against them, maybe like the t-shirt profiles where we need to be broadly skilled, but maybe deep on one level. I think that a lot of people actually have quite a lot of difficulties becoming that more broader sized t-shirt, like doing security and infrastructure and development, etc., etc. So that I can kind of recognize that.
Yeah, I see in startups, it's really common to have a lot of T-shaped people who just have to do everything, right? Because it's only a limited amount of people. But then often the things you have to take into account are also, well, fairly simple. You don't have to think about scaling to millions of users and those kind of things. So when we're moving towards scaling your applications as well, then we're adding additional complexity again. After just your software and your features, you also have to think about scalability and all those kind of things. So that's where the cognitive load becomes too large for a lot of these teams, and that's where platform engineering finds its place. So I don't think it's a replacement of DevOps. It's lowering the burden of those DevOps teams.
Okay, so
I think really you build it, you run it. That's the mantra of DevOps. I really still believe in that mantra. But running it doesn't mean you have to run everything, right? We also use platform as a service features in the cloud, for example. We still say that we're running that as a DevOps team, right? Even if we're not doing all the OS level patches and those kind of things, because that's abstracted away from our cloud providers.
But maybe like then one step before we get into real platform engineering. So what do you recognize as a platform then? So what can you describe as a platform within a company? Because we all know PaaS, like the Azure web apps and all the stuff that we use. But in an organization, what do you recognize as a platform?
It can be anything, right? So what I'd like to do with companies that struggle with, we want to have higher developer productivity, higher developer satisfaction, and lowering that burden. Try to investigate where is this burden? Where is your company lacking in certain skills? Is it maybe on the infrastructure level, or maybe on security level? Maybe they're spending a lot of time in boilerplate code. It can be all kinds of directions. So what you need to do is do some investigations, looking at your different teams that you have, and see where are they spending their time over and over again. Because there are so many repetitive tasks that teams just need to do when they're, let's say, they're creating a new API and they're creating several APIs. They need to do a lot of steps over and over again.
Yeah, so you say, for example, if you then have an API management within your organization that you have to set up securely and compliant, and you need to have all kinds of rights and access and boundaries around that API management, or setting up, like in this case, API management, so that developer teams can use it, DevOps teams can use that API management to host their own APIs. That is typically a task that a platform engineering team
could be a task, right? But looking at a broader perspective, let's say we have 20 teams. They're all building APIs. So what we need to do is we have some boilerplate code of how does a general API look like. It has to do authentication and all those kind of stuff in code. We need to do that in every API. Then we need to build infrastructure to host an API. All of those APIs are probably fairly similar. So everyone needs to do their infrastructure as code, etc., to actually be able to run that API somewhere. Then we need to do pipelines. Then we need to have a central place to manage all those APIs, like some form of API management. Then we need some monitoring of how our API is doing. All of those teams have to do all of these different steps, and then they have to implement the actual business logic in their APIs. But all of these steps, they can take quite some time, especially when you're building maybe a simple API. You could spend like 70% of your time on all of these repetitive tasks, and then only spend 25% of your time on actual some business logic. So investigate where are we actually losing time. What are the things that developers teams think are hard to do or spending much time in, and create some solutions for those teams so that they can just get that out of the box. That's the general perspective of platform engineering. And when you search the internet for it, there's a lot of companies doing tools and those kind of things that are trying to solve one of those repeatable tasks. But I like to look at platform engineering from a broader perspective, and that's just helping your actual DevOps teams to move faster.
Okay.
And to take control themselves.
Okay. Can you then also maybe say that platform engineering teams build engineering platforms?
Yeah, I think that should be the case, right? So a platform engineering team should create some kind of service or product that the other teams use, or can use when they feel like it. It should be just like a platform as a service feature in the cloud. I can use it, but I can also pick something else.
Yeah.
And when you're a platform engineering team, really see the other teams as your customers and try to realize the stuff that those teams actually need. Right?
Yeah.
I often see that these platform engineering teams are started from a traditional operations teams that move into, we're going to use the cloud, and then now we're going to do a platform team, and then a lot of these traditional operations people move into the platform team, and then they start doing operations in a new kind of way. So you can request all kind of things through tickets and those kind of things. I don't think that's still using the silo approach that we didn't like.
Exactly.
Before we did DevOps.
If you explain it like this, then I would also say maybe it's more like a platform engineering team still works in a DevOps fashion. Yeah. Only the roles and functionalities within the team are maybe slightly different than, for example, in a team that builds business features within an application. Yeah. So there are still maybe a little less developers, really specific developers, but more coding on the infrastructure level, etc., enabling things, but also maybe developers that build self-service portals for people to use, instead of we provision the server for you, or we provision this service within Azure for you. Teams should be able to self-service themselves.
Yeah, I like to see. I like to use the team topologies setup where traditional teams are set up like stream-aligned teams, right? The DevOps teams, they work on a certain value stream and are owning that value stream from end to end. And then setting up a engineering platform is a separate value stream that actually is built by a platform team.
Yeah. And well, if you have a platform team that actually builds the platform, self-service that to the developer team, and then a DevOps team actually wants to create, I don't know, some piece of infrastructure that is not provided by the platform engineering team. So how does that work? Does the DevOps team then start building their own templates? Can they do everything that they want? How does that go?
Of course, it depends, right? It really depends on the organization, but what I see most successfully is creating a model that's open for others to extend, right? So the platform team is owning the solution, but if you do it like internal open source, having the other teams giving them the possibilities to add certain features that they need, because that's often the problem, right? If you only allow the certain things that the platform team provides, then the platform team really often becomes the bottleneck instead of the enablers.
Yes.
And well, they were created to enable other teams and not to be the bottleneck. Well, in practice, I often see that, we create something, some infrastructure to create a API, for example. That's the template that everyone should use. And then, of course, the third team that wants to use it, they say, we need these features as well. Well, that's not supported yet. We need to put it on the backlog, and will be created in several months. Yeah, that team is blocked and cannot use your the things that the platform team actually provided. So, if you create the possibility for that team to create those features, add those features themselves, or just go their own way. Right, that should also be a possibility, because the DevOps team and the Streamline team, they are the owners of the actual application that comes out of it, and they choose the components that they want to use.
Yeah.
So don't enforce it on them. No, they are responsible for running the application, so they should be.
Yeah, so you can provide them with a certain, I don't know, template or whatever to like you can use this and then it's fairly good, but you can add to that, or you can do it yourself, but then you have these guidelines and these regulations that you need to adhere to. So more or less, a golden standard or.
What I often see in practice is that these platform teams are a team building a engineering platform, but they're also the team making up the rules or rules and regulations about security and risk and those kind of things. I think those are separate tasks. You should have a group being responsible for compliance and security and setting up the boundaries and things that you need to stay in between. And then that platform team can create a golden path implementation of like, this is what 80% of our team should be able to use. And try to focus, as I said, on the things that most people are actually waiting on. So don't focus on, we have this idea that we want to start off with creating these templates for infrastructure. Maybe you have a lot of good infrastructure people already in your teams. Maybe that's not the bottleneck they were that's taking a lot of time for them. So what I think is better is start measuring or start interviewing some of your lead developers, like what is taking you a lot of time when you're building a new product or a new API or whatever. What are those repetitive tasks that you need to do over and over again? And actually, how much time does this take? So if we create a service, how much time would that reduce? And then when you create such a service, also start measuring what the impact actually is. How much time did you save? Because building the platform also takes time, right? If you create certain features or services there that nobody uses, well, you could rather spend that time in building actual business features.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. Yeah. Okay, so is every organization suitable to have platform teams?
I think you need a certain scale for this. Because as I said, it's a separate team that's building a platform for the other teams. If you only have one or two teams, this doesn't make sense to have a completely separate team. Then you probably want to have that those capabilities just in the teams themselves, or you can use certain products off the shelf or that provide certain things for you.
Okay.
But especially in smaller organizations, there's less value to be gained by building such a platform. But especially in enterprise, you see a lot of enterprises focusing on these kind of things now because they want to make their DevOps teams more productive.
Yeah. So let's say that I am a bigger organization with a number of teams, and it makes sense if I hear the story to have some kind of a platform engineering team. So where do I start? So do you have any resources or any books or any things that you say, okay, then start doing this, start reading this, and then you can a little bit segue into building a platform engineering team?
Yeah, the thing that I see is that if you start browsing the internet, the term is already broken from the start. Like we tend to do, as we tend to do in our industry, is like, oh, this is a new hip term. Then all kinds of vendors dive onto this term and they start writing their own vision about what that means, and that often means especially the thing that their application or their product is delivering, right? So they're tried a bit making the definition of platform engineering a bit skewed. But if you browse through a lot of these different vendors and the documentation of these vendors, you do get an idea of what should be the certain capabilities that you need. What I would like to advise teams is start talking to your developer teams and check what their bottlenecks are, because it can be in completely different areas of maybe teams have you have a company with a lot of network security and changing firewall takes months.
Yeah.
That happens quite often in larger enterprises. So maybe that's something that you want to work on first. So that's completely different kind of platform as a platform that runs your applications on the Kubernetes in a managed way.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. So both could be a valid platform that's useful for your organization, but it really depends on the need that you have as DevOps teams.
Yeah. So interview your developer teams, find out their biggest concerns, biggest bottlenecks, and then build a team in your organization that can actually cater for that. That can help those teams to be self-sufficient, building a self-service portal or whatever, to make sure the developer teams can actually do it themselves.
Yeah.
Or just press a button and get it.
So self-service is key here, right? We don't want to create all kinds of portals where you can do a request and then at the end some ticket will be created. That's the opposite of what we want. That's again back to silos. You do a request and then a day later it gets rejected because you put at some point or a comma misaligned, right? So what I often start with in companies, if they don't have any tools, is just use the tools you already have, which is Git as source control and any form of pipelines. You can do some configuration as code and then have pipelines actually execute that code in a product. So the example that I mentioned before was the firewall. If you have your firewall rules just as configuration in some JSON or YAML or whatever files, stored in a Git repository that everyone could read and everyone could change, everyone could add a new rule for their application there in that firewall configuration, do a pull request, it gets reviewed by the security team or the people who need to do certain reviews, and then when that pull request get merged, that configuration file is actually sent to the firewall, so the changes are updated. And of course, you don't have to have the direct configuration files of the firewall there. It can be a certain abstraction, but that's something that you could create fairly simple yourself with tools that everyone already has. And when those things are moving and growing, then maybe looking for other tools that can make these things bigger and better for your organization. But these are small.
Yeah, those are the small things that you can do. So I think that we need to maybe start getting to a close here. But one of the questions that I have myself, but also I can imagine that when working in organizations that wants to start doing that, you're talking to people who need to decide that they have to make a budget out of it, they have to make money. So, and then the question that you always get is, okay, what is the business case to have a platform engineering team? How can I measure? And then of course measure is between brackets, but how can you measure that a platform team actually makes sense to have? How can you measure they are successful?
Yeah, well, it comes back to interviewing the teams that the DevOps teams that are building your actual business products, right? And seeing how much time do they actually lose by these repetitive tasks. And maybe that's simple. Okay, changing a firewall rule that is taking us 3 hours to fill in all kinds of forms, and then we have to wait for it, and then they make a mistake. Well, so let's say a firewall change takes 5 hours. And then you need to see how many of these requests do we actually have in a year. Is that only 10 requests? Well, then it's 10 times 5 hours. Maybe we should not build anything for this. But if it's 1,000 times 5 hours, then there actually starts becoming a business case. And then when you build these kind of tools and start small, as I said, using a Git repo and some pipelines, start measuring how often are these things requested. Maybe actually create a dashboard. Okay, we did 1,000 firewall changes in this self-service way, so that saved us 1,000 times 5 hours,
exactly,
right? So those kind of things, give an idea of your return on investment, and that's why I like to really start with what are the bottlenecks for the teams. What are those teams? We have to do a firewall change again.
Yeah. So I think that is also an important point, because you can, of course, measure the time being saved or maybe the money being saved. But I think also very important, it's not only about those numbers. Like I think happiness,
developer satisfaction.
Developer satisfaction. Like another firewall change, or okay, let's do it. Type, and 1 minute later you have your firewall change prepared and reviewed, and you can go. I think that also counts for something. That is not, that is not being something that you can express in money, but I think it is successful for your retention of people.
Of course. So it's multiple things. The easiest way is just try to measure how much time you've saved, and of course it's theoretical. Like when we say 5 hours per change, and then we just measure how much change actually go to our platform. And on the other hand, interview your developers on how happy are they with the process of developing software within your company, and how can we make that just a little bit easier.
Thank you very much. I think that we covered quite some ground, and the conclusion that I have is that DevOps is not dead. Far from that. I think DevOps is still very much alive, and there is something extra, a new kid on the block that's called platform engineering, that actually embraces the fact that DevOps and full build it, you run it on complex platforms in the cloud, etc., is quite hard. That it might make sense to have a specialized team doing all that stuff, enabling other DevOps teams that can focus a little bit more on business value. But all are DevOps teams, only with a different specialization. So they go hand in hand more than
it's really a good harmony. I think we're in a phase that we see that DevOps also has certain downsides, like the cognitive load, etc. And this just solves that. So it makes DevOps more or it just makes teams actually being able to do DevOps instead of doing all of these different capabilities a little bit and then.
I think specialization is always it helps in focusing and being better at what you do. Great. So I think it's time to wrap up.
Let's wrap up, and thanks for listening or watching, and hopefully see you at the next episode.
Thank you.
Bye.
The Lead Podcast, a podcast for leaders in engineering, architecture, and development.